Alright, hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar on Joomla. My name is Christine Harlim and I'm the Events and Membership Coordinator at Connecting Up who's bringing you this webinar today. This is our last webinar of the Web Management Month. If you have been following us, the last few weeks we've been going through a few different website webinars on different CMS as well, including WordPress and Drupal last week. So today's Joomla is the last one in the series. Before I move along, we've had some feedback from previous webinars about question times, where sometimes we do put questions towards the end, but sometimes we do have them halfway through, just so that it makes it a bit more interactive. So I'm going to ask you now to do a poll for me on when you prefer to have your questions answered, and depending on that, then we will adjust the how the webinar goes accordingly. So now on your screen you should have the poll, so if you can please just quickly vote on what your preferences are in terms of question time, so we can do it according to what you want actually. So alright, make sure you have your say on this. So it's still coming in. It's about 82% voted. Well, we'll close this in a minute. There's just a few more people that are still voting by the looks of it. And just also to let you know about the questions, just to make sure that just to make the process a lot smoother, if you can type in your questions in the question box and then we will address it as we go along. Alright, so I think everyone's voted now. And I'm going to share the results with you, so that's what it's like. So I guess most people, the majority of people, prefer to have it more interactive, so we will answer the question halfway through. Great, so thank you very much for participating in that. So I will introduce you to the speakers today. We have two speakers. We have Justin Beale and Lindsay Jackson. They're both from Energetica, and they will go through a brief overview on open source tools and Joomla with you, and then Lindsay will do a walkthrough of the system. So I will now like to pass it to Justin and Lindsay.
Hi, good morning. I'm Justin. I'm the sales manager at Energetica. I have been with Energetica for a year and a bit. I'm a non-technical person within our organisation, and I communicate with a lot of different clients and then with our technical people to find solutions. Lindsay is also here with us. Lindsay?
Hi, yeah, I'm Lindsay. I'm based in Townsville, so I'm hot. If everyone else is in cold places, it's really sunny here.
Thanks.
That makes you feel better. I've been with Energetica for about 4.5 years, and originally I wasn't a tech person, but now I'm somewhat geeky around non-geeky people, and my background was in community capacity building, regional development, youth development, and fell into this job, and I'm just really excited about the potential of technology to connect communities, support not-for-profit organisations, support community collaboration and interaction, and to support the great work of not-for-profits. And Energetica works exclusively with not-for-profits, so we don't do any business, we just do NFPs, non-government, government and local government, federal government, all sort of levels, and charities. So it's really exciting to work with fantastic organisations every day.
I'm also in Sydney, and unfortunately, well, fortunately and unfortunately, I live in Marrickville, and it's a flight path day for me, so I might have to mute occasionally, so I apologise. And Lindsay, you'll have to catch the ball as I throw it. Is that okay?
Sure, that's fine. I can do that.
That could be interesting. Energetica, we've been around for 12 years. Originally started by Lisa. It began as a ICT consulting business and looked at all facets of charities and not-for-profit organisations in terms of their technology needs. It morphed into a web design business about 5 years ago, or primarily a web design and configuration business. Lisa saw a need for not-for-profit organisations to access technologies that would help them with their online presence. And most of our time in the websites we've delivered have been centred on Joomla. There are some good reasons around that, and mainly that relates to the ability of low-resource organisations to be able to self-manage, update content on their own site, which we think is a very important thing in Joomla, and part of the reason that we have chosen it in most cases with our clients. We're a small business with 12, might be 13 permanent staff now. We just put an extra person on. We're located broadly across the East Coast. We also have someone in Canberra. We all work from home. We have a group of project managers, developers, designers, database consultants, admin. We tend to collaborate as a group on a lot of varying projects across a number of different sectors, as Lindsay said. We work exclusively with not-for-profits and government clients. We specialise in accessibility. We'll take you through a few features of accessibility, audience engagement and those sorts of tools, whether they be forums, blogs, newsletters, social media type tools. We also specialise in CRM development, and particularly Civi CRM, which is native to both, well, actually to Joomla, Drupal and WordPress, and design implementation and making sure that it fits the needs of our clients. So primarily we use open source tools, and we use Joomla, Drupal, Civi CRM and occasionally WordPress. And Lindsay, this is your slide.
Yeah, sure. Look, I really want to talk about open source and the benefit of open source. And I'll talk a little bit about the different open source systems and a brief bit about what the similarities or differences are between them. But open source is essentially free software. It's essentially free software in that the core is free. Sometimes there's additional costs for components, particularly in Joomla. They tend to be small costs. But the premise of open source software is really began from people being frustrated with proprietary software like Microsoft and wanting to cut so the software community, the developer community came together to develop alternative systems so that people could have access to great technology regardless of the cost and proprietary licenses. And so the movement's developed where there'll be a core team of people that develop, give their time, develop the core, work collaboratively with changes and things that go in it. And so you start to see the influence of people's passions and interests that move into to building and developing that open source core. And so, for example, one of the things that came through in the recent development of Joomla was around accessibility. They had a strong group of people that were really wanting to see the Joomla content management system become more accessible. So that's for people with, say, vision impairments, blind users, and particularly in the back-end administration area of the site, so that people that had different disabilities could still access and use the software. So I guess it's kind of an example of the community coming together to put something really positive into the core of the tool. And I think
sorry, Lindsay, just on that, do you think that that's the same for the big three, WordPress, Drupal and Joomla, for open source?
Absolutely. Yeah, they really are. So they're very similar in that way, in that the goals are for people to be able to access tools, have access to great technology. And I really like that premise, and I think that it resonates well with the not-for-profit sector, where it's about that global good, and it's about giving back and contributing. The good thing is that the systems can be quite robust. If for example, there's a security threat, the community is quick to jump on it and to develop a patch. Whereas with proprietary systems, then you may or may not find out if there's a security patch that's been released. So the community really works together in that way. Also, because the source code is open, developers have the ability to develop extensions or extended functionality for all systems. So that might be sliders or survey tools. There's a range of different add-ons for all systems to increase their
These are called
flexibility.
modules in Drupal.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So what that
people
means
get
is,
both.
yeah, what that means is you don't have the high costs of adding functionality and customization to your site. And what we see a lot of is people may develop, say, the first phase of their site, and they're often moving from quite a static, hard to update site going into a new system with lots of ideas. But what we do is we generally start the core, and then as the site evolves, they add new functionality to it. So it might be that they want to add a survey tool, or they want to do campaigns, or they want to add a forum. And with the flexibility of open source, you've got relatively easy access to new tools, or the ability in the sense that the source code is available for you to develop new functionality. And so, for example, we do a lot of development around accessibility. Some of that accessibility we feed back to the original tools that we may have customized. So there's that contribution back to the community. And that's what makes open source so great, and flexible and functional and robust and all that great stuff. So that's why we really like open source. So just briefly on some of the differences. WordPress is being used a lot more as a content management system in its own right, and so that's really about the ability to manage lots of content and to have lots of menu items and put lots of stuff in the site. That's open source. There's lots of different tools for that. I often feel that people tend to make big sites out of WordPress, and sites that are not necessarily capable of that capacity, that WordPress isn't necessarily capable of that capacity. So you can often end up with slow sites or sites that are a bit bloated. But WordPress originated as being a blog tool for people to be able to blog and have a web presence, and there's a lot of exciting stuff that happens in that community, and it's a really great choice for small organisations. Sometimes organisations will come to us that have no budget, or they'll be really tiny one-person organisations. And for those smaller groups, having WordPress is really useful because there's a lot of stuff online. It might even be something that you can kickstart yourself. So that's really nice. And then if the organisation grows, then you could take that to a developer to add new tools in, or move it over to a different content management system down the track. So that's the nice thing. There's lots of flexibility in moving to different systems, open source systems generally, and adding that functionality. Drupal is another great system, and we'll have people that request Drupal. I think it's fair to say that Drupal has a steeper learning curve than Joomla, and it's why we've preferenced Joomla in the past. Drupal can do a lot of great stuff. Out of the box, it doesn't do a lot, so you have to add additional stuff to it to extend the functionality, and that makes it a little bit tougher for organisations that have low technology experience to be able to manage and to continue updating or to create. Whereas we don't feel that Joomla has those restrictions. Although having said that, Drupal is starting to, it has been catching up, and that's been a big focus for them. And it's it's a great content management system as well.
What was at the bottom of the slide? Sorry, there's a couple of points. I think we missed it.
So these points are that the values align with the values of not-for-profits, and I think that's really true. The needs of the community are driven rather than by commercial interests, which is in some ways commercial interests will also carry forward, but I think there's a sense of enjoyment of creating tools that compete with commercial tools. And you can
I think also
community.
And that comes down to the responsiveness of the change, that if the need is there, then an extension in Joomla's case will be built to meet that need, rather than needing a certain amount of subscribers to sign on for a development for it to be created. There's a lot of instances where we can pick up on a development within the community and continue and complete that on behalf of our client, and also, I guess, for the good of the community. So it can be that you as the client can drive some change in the community if you have something that you definitely need, and obviously that's something that we'd assist you with to complete. So that's a piece of functionality that you require that is possibly not out there, or is possibly not configured the way that you need it.
I think in addition, sort of one last point of the change in acceptance of open source. When I first started about 4.5 years ago, we would often have to really try and upsell open source, and people were a little bit skeptical about it, especially, say, people in government that had really been used to proprietary systems. However, it's really changed over the last 4 years, and the openness to open source and the preference to open source in government has really been significant. And it's about government being seen to give to support the community, the open source community, but also acknowledging that as social media changes, or as the way that people want to collaborate and communicate online changes, that they need to have platforms that are flexible enough to be able to evolve with that. So choosing open source so that they won't be locked into a system that ends up being quite restrictive or cost prohibitive down the track if they want to add new things. And yeah, I think you've probably seen that as well, Justin, that people ask for open source, governments ask for open source, and that's really exciting as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the same across the three, to be fair, across the three main open source CMSs. They do have their differences, but there's also commonalities. So, next one. Joomla, you can add whatever you feel fit, Lindsay. I'm sure I don't have everything in here, just a few points. So Joomla's an award-winning content management system which enables you to build websites and powerful online applications. Its ease of use and extensibility make it a popular option, and we think that's key to why Joomla is the best fit for low resource not-for-profits, and in fact for any not-for-profits, government or charity-driven organisations. Its history, Lindsay, you probably know better than I do.
I think the history, again, is with the open source movement, people coming together and wanting to create an alternative. So Joomla has a strong core of developers, and an ever-expanding range of extensions. We'll talk a little bit more about the current version of Joomla, but it's gone through the transition of being not called Joomla to going to Joomla 1.0, which is probably about 7 or so years ago, and then about 4 or 5 years ago moving to a new version, 1.5 as they called it, and now we're in the 2.5 version. So it is common for systems to go through upgrades, and the most recent one has been quite a significant one because we've seen a big change in functionality, stuff around user groups, and again just meeting the trends of where technology is going and how people are wanting to use it.
And that's a lot to do with the take-up of the community and the number of sites and the people that are getting involved. And that's, the development team is now looking at having a balance between keeping things simple and still having a lot of out-of-the-box features to get people up and running as quick as possible, with the benefit of the extensions that you can add in when you need them. So, I guess an example of that is that you can put documents into articles within your website, but then you could also opt to have a document management tool that you add in further down the track when you reach a level of sophistication that's required because you have a number of documents that you need to store, search for, and I guess have people access.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about some individual tools. Sorry, Christine's got a couple of questions.
Sure. Let's do questions.
Great. We have a few questions here. The first one from Anthea Evans. Having our Joomla website updated at the moment, but they also want CVCRM. So should they be working on both at the same time, or should they develop fresh website and then the CVCRM?
It's an interesting question, and a discussion that we were having recently. Sometimes we do both, and there's no issue with sort of having it done straight away or adding it in after. So just so you know,
Yeah.
CVCRM is a membership management, fundraising management, grant management system that people that use, and again, that's open source. And you can either add CVCRM into a Joomla or a Drupal site. Look, I think it's about really understanding what it is that your organisation wants to get out of CVCRM, and really making sure that you work with a developer that understands what it is that you want. We have a significant number of Civi rescue cases and Joomla rescue cases, to be honest. On the question of if you should be doing both first, one of the things that we noticed is that projects that have both Civi CRM and Joomla at the same time tended to run over budget, or not over budget, over time, to a higher proportion. And I think it's because it's often quite tough on your organisational resources to be doing both at the same time. So it's about considering your organisation. Have you got enough people that are focusing on the website, and particularly if you're writing content, because that's where it's the most resource intense for an organisation. So do you have that covered, and do you have the people that can commit to doing the Civi CRM? If you're comfortable that you've got both and you've got those internal resources, then by all means go ahead with both. But if you feel like, people are going to be stretched, and sometimes what we find is that people haven't dedicated enough resources or enough time for people to really focus on the content and the setup of the system. Sometimes it might just be, just given to a couple of people on top of the work that they've already got. So we really encourage managers and organisations to make sure that you give people space to be able to focus on it. So it's quite subjective. We do both, and we more often than not do both at the same time, but it is an important organisational consideration for you to think about resource-wise.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I think there were a few people asking what is CRM. So CRM is technically a constituent relationship management, and it's, in a simple term, I guess it's like a database, but it does more than just a database. As Lindsay mentioned, there's volunteer management, fundraising, donations. You can do internal stuff, and it can ultimately be integrated to your website. Just while we're talking about CRM, September is actually our CRM month, so you will hear more about CRM next month. The next question is from Pip, and her question is, how good is the built-in security within Joomla?
The built-in security is good, but it's always a consideration. And it's not so much about the core, because the core gets updated regularly and releases come out regularly. It's a bit more about the extended functionality that you add onto the site. So it's really important before you add something in to make sure that you've checked its security credentials, and there's a website that lists things as there's a vulnerability and then when a vulnerability has been resolved. I think choosing extensions, so that's extending stuff out. So that's the stuff that you add onto the site, whether it's a slider or whether it's an events tool. Choosing things that are reputable. Joomla's got an extensions directory, the Joomla extensions directory, and you can look up different tools, and there'll be ratings and reviews, and you'll see in reviews where people aren't happy with something, or it's not performing, whether that's security or otherwise. The other
I think
thing
it's also the developer
Yeah, I think that is key. Making sure that they have an approach to security and ask questions about that. And server security is also really important. So ask the question about how often backups are taken of the site and where backups are stored. So a couple of years ago there was a significant thing where a server was hacked and it pulled down hundreds of sites. Some of them were never retrieved, were they, Justin?
No, from memory,
No.
like 70% were okay, and then there was something like 30%. Do they have to basically recreate the website?
Yeah.
From the content
in
that they
this
had?
case, they didn't store them off-site. So once someone hacked into the server, they could access everything, and that included corrupting their backups. So those are really key questions, and it's worth asking the developer, or if you're doing it internally, considering your approach to it and what protections you're going to make.
Next question from Charles. Yeah, what version of PHP is required and recommended on the host to run Joomla?
Okay, you want a version 5 and higher. I can't think of what our exact version is that we've just upgraded to, but there are some tools, for example, our newsletter tool that we use that needs to be 5 point something and higher because it's no longer supported with the lower version. So you know, you want to be keeping it up to date, although there is still room for support. But we're not really that tech on all that stuff.
Two more quick ones. Paul is asking why it's called a content management system. How is it different as opposed to, say, Dreamweaver?
Okay. You might see that as we go in and take a look at the back of the site. You can go into the back of the site. You can see where articles are added, content items are added. You can add your menu items. You don't need to have any HTML experience. You can edit things from the front and the back. So it's more sophisticated in that, you know, how you manage and use your content is more, I guess, easier to use, more systematic, or not more systematic, easier to use, easier to see where the content is and change categories and things like that. So it really has broken down the barriers of what sort of stuff you need, and you don't need Dreamweaver to manage any open source system.
Last question for now is from Vikram. Is it possible to install Joomla on a desktop PC and start using it? Any special requirements in terms of hardware or operating system?
There's not. You need to have a local host on your system. So that's like a local server that lets the site run on your local computer. And there's stuff online about that. You don't need any sort of any other software. Everything's browser based. We will recommend using Firefox and Chrome to be editing and managing in the administration end. Having said that, we've got a government client that refuses to use anything but Internet Explorer, and they don't run into issues at all. But it can be a bit of an issue, and that kind of comes down to they build Joomla to be compatible. It's easier to build it to be compatible with things like Firefox rather than Internet Explorer, which is proprietary and locked down. However, getting things to work in other browsers is always a consideration, and that's a consideration for us as developers. So, for example, we don't develop for Internet Explorer version 6 just because it's older and there's stuff that you know, you really need to do a lot of development to get things working and looking right. So we'll get it looking good, and then a message that comes up to say, hey, upgrade your browser. And there's security risks for people on their own PCs to not be updating their browser anyway. But you do have to consider that you may add some functionality or add some styling to the site, and you will need to tweak that to get that looking fantastic in Internet Explorer and Firefox. But effectively, you don't need any stuff or any software on your system. It's all browser-based.
Great. We might move on now to your next section.
Yeah. Next slide, Lindsay. I think we'll do a couple more slides and get into the run-through. There's a link there, community.joomla.org showcase. You can review I think it's over 3,000 sites that have been put up or submitted to that particular site to review, and they're broken into categories of sites. I guess usage is an interesting statistic and not an easy thing to measure. There's about 30% of websites, and that's from w3text.com, use a known CMS as an extraordinarily large list of CMS types. So 30% of all websites use one of these known CMSs. WordPress is used by 16.7 of all of those websites, or about half. Joomla about 2.8 of all of those websites, or about 9%. Drupal's probably about the same. Lindsay, what do you think on that? Why the disparity? I tend to think that it's because there's a lot of smaller individual blog-based WordPress sites out there that might be for people putting their own photos up there, or for music, or for advertising, things like that. Is that
Definitely.
your take on it?
Yeah, and it was kind of there first as something that was easy and anyone could set it up, and you can host it on the WordPress server, so you don't need to know FTP and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's definitely why it's so popular. I think if you looked at specific, say, the government or the not-for-profit sector and compared it, you would probably see a little bit more equality in the systems, or at least a little bit lower in WordPress as people opt for bigger, more robust systems. But there's a lot of great things about WordPress, and in a lot of ways it's been really accessible, especially for small organisations or single people, individuals. Single people.
Yeah, and so I've pulled out a couple of examples just to show the breadth of usage of Joomla currently in the US. I've listed 3 sites there: an educational, Harvard. 3 Square is a not-for-profit food redistribution organisation. Women's Refugee Commission is related to UNHCR, I think. Yep. And and global sites, Cool Planet was a UN site, the Guggenheim Gallery. There's a NATO site, which is an interesting one given that it's a security and military related website, and apparently we're looking at them at the moment. Is that right, Lindsay?
Yeah, we'll look at the Guggenheim, but I'll show you some other sites when I go and show you.
There you go.
Oh, this little movie is not showing in. Oh, no, there it is.
I guess that a lot of people looking at WordPress, Joomla, Drupal might look at a WordPress site and look at how the design treatment's been put together for that, and I think that's often a starting point for comparison is how it looks in WordPress as opposed to Drupal and Joomla. I know that Chris covered off themes in Drupal, and we'll get to templates in Joomla, but I think that design really comes down to the designer and getting a really good design, and any good design can be cut into all 3. I think though that there's some other considerations around design in terms of accessibility and the application of the template and theme, and how robust and flexible that is, and I think each of the 3 have differences, but I think that a good design can be implemented into any of the 3 CMSs. So what do you think is the biggest difference, Lindsay, between
as far
WordPress
as
and
design
Joomla?
goes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think that we often, so for example, we're just redeveloping a site that was originally built in WordPress, and the organisation just got too big and they got too much stuff in there, and it was no longer working for them. And I've seen WordPress sites that are just slow because they're kind of doing too much with the template and with the functionality, whereas we don't run into that problem with Joomla. It's just set up to manage that a lot more easily. I guess having said that, it's the system that you use is one thing, and it's something to consider. But I think that your development team is also, that's the backbones of all that. If you've got people that are working with you on your content structure and working closely with you on adding content and how things will be laid out, and feeling that confidence that you are working closely with a team that's going to take you along for that journey to produce something. I think the content management system is the shell of that, but that alone, won't produce you a fantastic site. So it's about considering all of that stuff.
And having a knowledge of all of the options and being able to pick the ones which best suit and best reflect the organisation in the end.
Yeah.
As the development team.
Yeah. For say boutique design agencies and people that focus predominantly on design and marketing, they will often use through system, but they will often do WordPress sites because it's easier for smaller low-tech development companies to create and manage WordPress sites. So, you might get something that looks good, but if you scratch the surface, it's not actually fulfilling the functionality that you actually need your site to do. And the ACAN website, which is the Australian Communications Consumer Action Network, is a really great example of that. So that was a site that we originally tendered for and lost the tender. And they went through the stuff of getting their brand and getting their logo and getting their colours with another agency, which is great because it's really useful to go through that process. But when they built their website, the system was inflexible. It couldn't grow, it couldn't meet the campaigning needs of this really active organisation. And it really didn't take them very long to kind of come to a grinding halt with it. And so, the pity there is that a lot of the legwork and a lot of the stuff that they did had to be disbanded. And then they came back to us and we recreated their site using the branding that they developed, so that it wasn't all lost. But now they've got a site that grows with them, and they can add tools to and meets their campaigning and their communication needs. So that happens as well, and that's always a risk, especially to organisations that have low or minimal budgets. And I think trusting that your organisation if you choose a development team, that they're going to meet your needs. Particularly when it comes to accessibility, and we'll talk about that shortly, because that's a bit of a pitfall for organisations as accessibility standards start to increase over the years, and accessibility expectations and people's rights to accessible technology.
I think we might have to step it up because we've got, I think, one or two more slides, and then we want to get into you showing people around. So I'll whip through this one. Why Joomla? It's mature and advanced development state. It's easy to use web software, which you can look at a number of forums, and that's probably its comparison point, its leading comparison point, that it's easy for you to manage content yourself, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's simple or complex as you need it to be, so therefore it can be built to accommodate non-technical users, and you don't necessarily need that the technical staff in-house to be able to manage the site and develop it yourself over time, but it also can be geared towards developers who work with APIs and CVCRM installations. It's expandable. There is a site that you can go and look at yourself, which lists all the extensions that can be accessed and added to the site, and there's something like 8,000 across a number of different categories. It's scalable. It can be a small site with very little information within it, with a sharp design, or it can be scaled up to a multi-site, multi-focus and multi-advocacy area website, relatively easy with changes and additions to the information architecture, which is the structure behind a website, so the categories that content sits within. It's flexible in terms of what you can add to it and the out-of-the-box functions. It has front and back-end editing, which we'll take you through briefly. You can maintain and add content, change templates yourself, add functionality without programming skills. We see it as a platform for the future. It's only developing over time. As more and more users and more people join the community and take it up, it'll only get more and more feature rich at its core, and then there's the extensions that can be added to it. So I think in the next couple of years, I think all three of the CMSs are going to have growth over the next 5 years, but we think Joomla is a good fit for the clients that we talk to. Built-in user management functionality, seamless template management application, and a robust API framework. We'll touch on those in the walkthrough. Is there one more slide before we go into
that? I think that's not.
Okay.
I need to move on to the walkthrough now.
I'll just talk quickly about this. This is the nuts and bolts of our walkthrough, and it relates to any website development. I think this is common to all of the three CMS, that these are the things that your developer will talk to you about and that you need to be aware of, and that basically make up a website. So the information architecture we see as the skeleton, that the muscles, which is the functionality, and the skin, which is the design, sit over, and they're made up of articles, content, categories, pages. Navigation items are those user paths and those items that people follow to get to different information types, which are built into the site. Accessibility consulting, well, the accessibility features which are built in so that people of all accessibilities can get to content types they need. Design, we've touched on content types, text, links, video, photos, docs. Configuration of out-of-the-box features and extensions, adding content, and then training support. So that's sort of an overview of what a website development process will look like. So we'll look through each of those now with Lindsay in the Joomla CMS.
Excellent. Was there another question, Christine? I've just put Christine just put the link out to the requirements for Joomla. So the recommended is PHP 5.3 plus, and the minimum is 5.2.4. But like I said, sometimes you may find tools that are wanting a slightly higher, although I think 5.2.4 is still standard for most of the ones that I'm aware of. Is that
Yeah,
what you were going to say, Christine?
Yeah, I was just going to say if we can move on to the walkthrough now. I think a lot of people are waiting for that, and we only have a few, like 15 minutes left. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. All right, great. So I'm going to show you a few things, and I'll show you things in a range of different sites, and it'll end up being not particularly deep, but this is one of our development sites. I'm just going to log into the front end. One of the great things about Joomla is that it's really easy to edit content from the front end, and that means that you can have different user groups. So you might have people in your team that are the administrators that are doing stuff in the back end, but you might have people that you just want to be able to add a new content item or edit existing content, maybe even send out the newsletter. And so the ability to do these things from the front end is really useful. And so if I say want to edit this article, I can click on this pencil edit icon now that I'm logged in because I've got that permission, and I come in here and it's looking a bit messy on that page, but I've got a WYSIWYG editor here, and a WYSIWYG editor means what you see is what you get, and this is really the thing that made web technologies accessible for people, because you don't need HTML to style your page. You can have a WYSIWYG editor, and it's kind of similar to Word, where you can come in, choose your heading levels, put a heading in, make things bold, make things italic, put links in, and manage your images really quite easily. So that's kind of the great thing that makes it easy for you to add content in. I'm just going to cancel out of this one. And it depends on what you want to do to the front end of the site as far as what the functionality will be. So it might also be that you want people to be able to log in and say you're members, and you only want members to be able to see certain bits of information. So you can have different menu items and different content items accessible to different groups. With Joomla 2.5, which is the more recent release, that ability to create groups was really added into the system. So before we had really just a couple of user groups, so you could have registered users or you could have special users, and public. So you were kind of limited from the front end to 3 different user groups. Whereas with the update in Joomla 2.5, you can have specific groups and put specific people in them. You can register people, and then depending on what they answer in their registration, put them into certain groups. You can have menu items that only some people can see. So in that sense, it's where Joomla has really caught up with, say, Drupal, that's had a lot more user access level control for a lot longer. So here I'm got the ability to add a new article. I can come in here and I can add my content. If you want to have a restricted layout, you could force where links and images are going to go, and then I can put it into whichever category I've got in the site as well. So I can add a news item really quite quickly, just save it from the front end, have it published, and that's it. I don't need any administration access to the back end of the site. If we log into the back end of the site, we start to see a lot more functionality. So these are all of the content items in the site, and we call them, Joomla calls them articles. I've got the ability to manage menus and add menu items. So if anyone's familiar with, say, WordPress, the layout's quite a bit different, but the functionality is a little bit is greater, and there'll be limitations with, say, WordPress on, for example, out of the box, if you want a menu item to be called something different from your post or your page, it's, you know, the system doesn't let you do things like that. Whereas in Joomla we can have menu items that are pointing to different functionalities. So for example, this is the Donate Life website, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But on this website, this menu item is pointing to their Book of Life, which is a collection of stories about people affected by receiving or losing a loved one to, and which is associated with organ transplantation, giving or receiving. People can submit stories into the site via a form in the site, and then they're added to this page. So this page, this menu item is display this book, as opposed to display, say, an article title. And then we've also got additional functionality like modules. So any little box or any little thing that's doing something other than a straight article page is going to be a module. So we've got a search module, we've got menu modules, we've got these menu modules that drop down, we've got a Twitter module here. So they're the modules. And sometimes I think there's other systems that kind of look like they're easier. We give people 3 hours of training, and 1.5 of those is dedicated to front-end training and using the WYSIWYG editor to get consistent styling and manage your images. And then the other 1.5 hours is that back-end administration training, plus maybe an additional element if there's extended tools in the site. And once people have had that training, they really don't come back to us after the site's built until they want to start adding new things. So Joomla is incredibly flexible, but it is really easy to use, which means that organisations that have low technology capacity or like limited staff training or awareness of technology can really pick up Joomla and run with it. And the Donate Life website's a really good example of that. So this was a website that was originally built using a proprietary system, and it just couldn't keep up with what they wanted to do currently or in the future. So they had a lot of, they couldn't access their templates, and they had people adding styling in, and it just kind of became a mess. And this organisation ended up, before the project finished, losing their key tech geek person that was managing the site. And the person that took over what's really a complex site, because there's a lot of functionality in here, didn't have any Joomla web experience, and she's just done a great job of managing and understanding the content and using a site that's really, really complex, and it's a real testament to the ease and the logic behind Joomla. So here we have a little video that's embedded into the site, and we've got some sliders that do stuff, and we've got the Book of Life in this site, so there's a lot of stuff that's going on in there.
Lindsay, do you want to just go in and add an article and then just show some of the...
I think we're running out of time, to be honest. Let me just keep moving, and then if we need to, we'll go back.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to just add a new item?
Well, we'll do template and then we'll do extensions. I think we'll just stick to a navigation through the back end.
Yeah.
Sorry
but adding a content, that's okay. Adding a content item is quite easy. So what Justin was talking about with getting the core and getting the content right and getting the information architecture is really key, because design and how pretty a site looks can, that's the sort of stuff that goes over the top of it. So what I'm going to do is actually just break this website, but I'm going to show you that we can just change this template, and all of a sudden the templates change. We've got a different header, we've got a different style, no style as it may be. But literally with a click of a button we can change it. So that means if you've got your site and you need a refresh, you can keep the Joomla structure, you can keep your content, you might rejig things and move your information architecture around, or your menu items around as the site grows and evolves, but you don't have to ditch it. You just pretty it up and add a new template or something like that. And that's really nice, and that adds to the longevity of the site. Yeah, we're using 2.5 for this demonstration. We still have sites in 1.5, but 1.5 is going to stop being supported by the Joomla core at the end of this year. So it is the time that people need to think about how they're going to about upgrading any 1.5 sites. Unfortunately, the upgrade process is not straightforward. There are some tools that help with the migration of content and the template, but the templating is quite different. So it might also be time to think about a refresh of the site. Joomla 3.0 is in development, but the upgrade process to that is going to be much more smoother. And we have a point-and-click upgrade process that's working with the current version of 2.5, where you click and it upgrades. So it's really easy to maintain the core and most of the tools in that way. I do really want to talk about it in this site. That's okay. I have a forms tool, which is really great for adding, say, job inquiry forms, volunteer inquiry forms, and I've got a maps tool that we're using to just put little maps, little locational maps on the site. Hang on, I'll just change template. And we've got some administration tools that we use just to make sure that the site is safe, and we've got the ability to take backups easily as we're adding things in. I'll just keep pushing because I realise that we're running out of time. This is a sneak preview of a site that's going to be launched on Friday, and this is the Arts Access Australia site. And they kind of ran into the same sort of issue where, they got a new site developed, and then it just wasn't robust, it wasn't flexible, and it just wasn't modern, and it wasn't keeping up with the way that they wanted to be engaging with their community. However, this site, they wanted it to be AA accessible. So all government sites are going to have to be A accessible, and this relates to the WCAG accessibility guidelines, and and we'll send Christine a link to send that out to people. It's not a requirement for not-for-profit organisations, but accessibility really is something that you should be considering, as it's about access and equity for people to be able to access sites. And I think that you really need to test the accessibility credentials of your developer if you go with one. Just because I see a lot of sites where they just have a resize your text, and that's their accessibility statement. And we don't think that's enough, and it's not enough to reach A levels of accessibility, let alone AA levels of accessibility. And we think it's really important to just keep pushing the boundaries of what you develop that's accessible. So sliders should be accessible and videos should be accessible. We're moving slowly into the area of making authoring tools accessible. So on this site, if you're an artist, you can add your artist profile. You can add your artist profile to the site. So there's, I think this has just been changed so that they're restricting some of these areas and I'm not logged in. So you can add events in this site, you can add opportunities, which are things like workshops or funding, you can add your artists. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that authoring tools are accessible. And we're not there yet, and there's a lot of development work to do, and we're talking about how we can work on that development with the wider Joomla community. But the process that we have gone through with this site is an accessibility audit on the level A and AA accessibility of the site. And it took a lot of work, and there's a lot of stuff that we've done. We had a really great base because we have our local E, which is a collection of 41 local government sites that we're using a multi-site management tool to develop, and they had to be accessible. I think they had to be A accessible for those local government requirements. So we'd already done a lot on accessibility, and so that was really great for us. We had a really solid base. But this site will meet the requirements of AA accessibility. So this is one of our local government sites. And they've got a similar type template because they came from a original multi-site tool that they were using. Not Joomla, but that was a bit, it wasn't great. But this is an example of a really beautifully designed site that's accessible. And that's really exciting because, sometimes people feel like they have to compromise design for accessibility. And it's really nice to hit that balance of not having to do that. Okay, so the adding of the content and the management of the content really is the big thing because that means that you don't have to pay someone else to do it. You can add the content yourself, you can change the content yourself, you can change the menu items. If you've got extended tools, you can add your events, or you could even open it up to the community. So we've had sites in the past where community members can add events. The Greenway site's a nice example of that, where you can register to the site and you can add events. They also have a group of registered users that can add other content to the site. So that being able to do stuff and to not have to go back to your developers, potentially ever, we've certainly got clients that never come back to us because they can just do it all themselves and their site kind of stays the same. And maybe if they want something new down the track, they'll come back and talk to us. So that reduction of cost and being able to manage that internally is really great. And there's also some great editors like that WYSIWYG editor that we were looking at. There's a little button in that one. You just click it and you link to your YouTube video, and bang, you put a video in. So as robust as this site content is and as varied as it is, they manage all of this themselves. It's only new stuff that's new styling or something that they have to come in and ask us to do. And it's really just a team of one person that was originally an admin and now she manages web content, and that's a really exciting thing to add to your resume. Oh, okay. Do we have any more questions? Or Justin, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
We do have a few questions. I think
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, Lindsay, did you manage to show how to add an article? Because there were a few questions on that.
Yeah, let's add an article. That's fine. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll add a new
from the back end and do the news option so it's on the front page plus in the inner page. Okay, and then just look at a couple of configuration options around the article.
Okay, all right. So here I'll come into the back end, and again I could do this in the front end. And this is a great news item, and I'll come in here. So in this case, I know that this is going to go into a news category, so I'll put this into news. I also might be creating a new menu item, and I might be putting a content page about a service or something like that. This is my content, and I'll put a heading in. So one of the things that's really important with, say, heading levels and the way that the content's structured is the considerations around accessibility. So we talk to people about having the right heading level markup. So that means that, for example, the title is always going to be output as a heading 1. So we can't use another heading 1 within the site. Then we might have a bit of content, and then we'll have a heading 2 and some more content. Now I'm just going to change that to a heading 2 because that's still normal. So I'll change that. So all I've got to do is just highlight over this, click my little drop down and choose heading 2. So I've got a heading 2 there. And then this is going to be a heading 3. So for accessibility, we want to have order to the way that we're using headings. So our title's heading 1. That means the next heading that we need to use is a heading 2. Then we could go to a heading 3. We could go back to a heading 2. What we can't do is go from a heading 1 to a heading 2. From a heading 1 to a heading 3. Because someone using a screen reader will logically wonder where the heading 2 content is. Is it displayed somewhere different on the site? Is it in a module box on the side? Are they missing a significant piece of information? So that is really about keeping your content accessible. Also things like if you are going to link to an item, don't use just the word click here to make to use the link. That's not going to meet the accessibility guidelines. You need to have more information. If you want to have click here, you might want to say click here to download web made easy, if that was, say, a document name, and then we make that the link, so that when someone's reading it with a screen reader, they read that the link is click here to read web made easy, a document, for example. So they know what it is that they're going to be downloading. Otherwise, they'll just see a range of click here, click here, click here, and it won't make any sense. So that stuff around what you can do within your organisation to make sure that the content that you're creating is accessible is also really important, and that should be something that you talk through with your web developer. So this is a really short article, but this is my news item here. So I've saved this in the back end. I've published it to this category, and this menu item is pointing to this category, and here you can see that my news item is here. And we can also add video, images. This is just going to show anything that's published into that area. If I wanted to, say, make a menu item out of it, I'll just go here. I could add a new menu item. I'll just add a new menu item. So this is my menu item type, and there's a lot of options to choose here, but really you just want to create an article menu item. You'll know if there's additional menu types that you're using in your content, and that'll be set up for you when you create your site. And I'll just put this in as a new menu item. And over here, I'll select the article that I want, and that's the one that I've created. I'll just choose this one here, a news item with an extremely long title. I could have searched for the item that I've created as well. I'm just going to refresh this. So I haven't actually saved it and closed it down. What I can do is I can go to the front end of the site and I can refresh. And here's my new menu item. And I can click on that and I'll go to my article page and I'll say, yep, that's cool, that's exactly what I wanted. So I can then save and close that down. And I've got my new menu item.
And all the options for the content types are on the left-hand side there, so they relate to the back-end additions, don't they?
They actually relate to things that you can do from the front end, actually. Yep. We've got the administration.
But there's a similar option in the back end, so that's been
exactly. Sorry,
edit from the
So just to mention, we have got a lot of questions. We won't have time to address all of them, unfortunately, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the ones that are quite technical on the things that you can demonstrate, but some of the other questions that probably can be answered a bit later. So if that's all right with you both, I'm going to send you all the questions that we don't get to answer, and we can, if you can put together an answer together, and I can put it on a blog post, so
we can certainly do that.
check it. Yeah, and as I said again, we are recording this webinar, so if you have to leave now, we totally understand it. We just have a few quick questions on in terms of logins and stuff. How do you log into the front end, because Paul usually works in the back end?
Okay, sure. I'm just going to log out because you'll see that I'm already logged in. It really depends. So sometimes if we have an organisation that is going to have registered users and you know the registration is freely open, we'll have a login form on the front end of the site, or we will keep the login in a menu item, say. If there's security reasons why you don't want that visible, then we can move that somewhere else. But all I have to do is log in, my password information is already saved, and I press login, and I'm logged in. And that's really all I have to do. And now I can see a pencil, so now I can edit any of these content items.
Also, just a quick question on the contact form. Are you able to show us the contact us form as an example, back end and front end side?
Yeah, definitely. We have we're not using the out of the box Joomla contact form, but I can show you an example of where it is being used. So if I go to the Greenway site, and this is a 1.5 site, I click on About the Greenway and Contact Us, and I've got a contact form in here. Now this contact form you can set up in the back end and link that to a user or an email address, and then that'll get emailed through to that person. It's not actually stored within a database in the site, so for example you can't log in later and then see all of the past contacts that have been added to the site. Oh, this is a 2.5 site, sorry. But I think we are still using the contact form for this. So see, these are the different contact groups, and we've got them linked to a user, and we could have them categorized as well. And you can show email addresses, lots of different information. We tend to just keep forms pretty straightforward unless people need additional stuff. So there's a bit of a summary. So for this example, this was a contact form for a walking tour. So this was before they had an events management tool. These are the contact details. And then these are all of the fields that they want to show or hide. So we could show their street address, we could show their mobile phone number, we could show an image if we wanted to. And that's standard. So that's Joomla out of the box. And that's always in every installation. We use another tool called Chronoforms, and this is a forms tool. Now this isn't set up in this site with a database because that's not complete, but we can connect the table connected. We can connect the table to it so that information is actually being saved and stored in there. And that's how we use our contact forms, because we've got a little bit more flexibility to add some additional fields. So that's what we're using there. And we could add a capture, or we could add some additional information if we wanted to as well. This is really just a skeleton site. This is what we call our development site. And then we work with our developer to come up with the banner and make it beautiful, and then it looks like one of our other nice sites. So this is still looking a little bit plain now.
We might close the webinar there. I think a lot of people have to go for lunch and stuff. I understand that there are heaps of questions that we haven't answered, and as I mentioned, we will compile them, and we will Lindsay and Justin will put together the answers for you. We will put them up on our website, and we will send you all the links so you can get your questions answered eventually. So once again, I apologize for not being able to address them right now, but rest assured that we will get to them at some stage. So maybe by the end of the week or sometime next week.
Put an option in there with a screenshot as well for each of them.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll definitely do that. And then in addition, we'll also provide our email addresses. So feel free to email us if you've got anything else, or phone or something like that. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
Well, I might close the webinar there. Thanks, Lindsay and Justin, and thank you everyone for participating. And thanks to everyone for participating. I will send through a link to the evaluation form. If you would like to see any particular thing, advanced webinars or something in the future, please do let us know on the form, and I will send you some follow-up resources, including Justin and Lindsay's contact details in the email. Well, thank you, and have a good afternoon, everyone.